Hi everyone, it's Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the months of August and September. I didn't really read enough books in August to do a wrap up kind of by itself, and I also didn't really have that much time to film because I don't know if you heard, I don't know if I've mentioned it at all, but I kind of got married. Every video, I got married. Did you hear? I got married. So I thought I'd just put it all into one video and we could talk about all of them all together. So as always, all of these books will be linked in the description box below if you'd like to check them out any further, if any kind of pique your interest. So I can't remember the order I read these in, but I think the first one that I read was Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson, and I read this because this was the July-August yes, that's how months work, and pick for the Feminist Orchestra Book Club if you want any more information about how you can be involved. There is a link to the Goodreads group in the description box below, and you could also just follow along with the videos that Jean and I post. So there was a video about this book on Jean's channel where we discussed it at more length. But I really enjoyed this. This was a reread for me, and it's a fictionalised version of Jeanette Winterson's own childhood. So I think there's some kind of blurred lines as to what's real and what isn't. But it's about her growing up in the north of England, being raised as part of a very ultra-conservative kind of Christian family and wider church group, and then realising as she hits puberty that she's gay, and how her parents and the rest of her community react to that essentially, and how she kind of grows into herself. It uses a lot of references to fairy tales, Arthurian legend, and also the Bible, and it's very interesting to see kind of the way that I guess Jeanette in the story, but also Jeanette the author, is coping with her own past. So if you'd like to hear us talking about this in more detail, I'll link the video that Jean and I did in the description box below. Next I read Brighton Rock by Graham Greene, and I've not read any Graham Greene before, so this was my first introduction to him. And this is about a group of young gangsters in Brighton I mean, I don't know when this is set. I want to say like the 70s or 80s. That's how it felt when I was reading the book, but I'm not really sure. And we're mainly focusing on a very, very young, kind of 18-year-old gangster called Pinky, who is very kind of hard-worn, very brutal, very, very, very angry. And what happens when this group of gangsters end up killing somebody and then having to cover it up. So there's a girl who's kind of witnessed it, who Pinky then gets involved with. There's a much older woman who was with the man on the day that he got killed, and it's kind of all of them trying to work out what happened, and then Pinky and the gangsters trying to cover it up, and it all kind of comes to a big head conclusion at the end. And it was fine. I actually quite enjoyed it. I'm not sure that I absolutely loved it. It was just an okay read. I think some of the characters in here, such as the older woman who's kind of interested in what's going on with the guy who died, was quite stereotypical. I mean, there's some kind of cliches in here, but that could just be because of when it was written. I would love to hear any recommendations from anyone who's read any more Graham Greene. Like, is there anything else that I could read? Anything that you'd recommend? Kind of what you thought about it? Because I thought it was, you know, I'd be interested in reading some more, but I wasn't completely blown away by it. Something that I was blown away by it, however, was Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. This is a non-fiction book. I've been on such a non-fiction kick recently, and I think it started from reading this book because I absolutely loved it. What Rennie does is look at all different aspects of UK society and racism. Originally this book was prompted by a blog post that she wrote under this title, and she's kind of then expanded and looked at much more kind of historical and structural racism in the UK. And some of her arguments are just so they're so right. You know that it's true, kind of from your own experience. You can kind of feel that that's correct. But also she gives you so much evidence and historical kind of context that you don't know about. Her main argument is that it's so difficult to talk about race in the UK because as a country, as a society, we believe that we're not racist and that we never had a racism problem. We feel like that's a problem in America where they had slavery, and like we never had that issue here. We kind of have got rid of our own history, like how involved in the slave trade we were and how racist the society was for black people coming into the UK in the 60s, people that came over from the Caribbean on the Windrush generation. Like, we don't have any context as to why they came to the UK. Like, we don't have any context as to because we owned slaves over there. Like, that's why we felt like people in the Caribbean were kind of part of our country. There are examples such as of the British Empire just being horrific, like asking people from India to come and fight for us in World War I and promising them, oh, if you fight for us, we'll give you independence. And then after World War I being like, oh no, we joked, you're not getting independence, sorry. But she also talks about modern society and kind of how it feels to be a black person growing up in the UK now. And one angle that I thought was very interesting is she talks about the kind of current feminist movement and how it's very difficult within people who even themselves feel like they are fighting for equality, like white feminists I'm talking about here, would then still deny kind of her feelings of being discriminated against and her experiences of racism, and they would kind of shut that down and feel like that she's derailing the conversation about feminism, like when, you know, her experiences are just as valid. And it's very interesting how it's all woven together and you can kind of see that context. She makes it so readable, so easy to access, and I would really recommend this to everybody, especially everybody living in the UK, because as Rennie highlights, we don't really have this kind of social discussion or this kind of social history taught to us as part of our curriculum. So I found it very interesting and also very useful as a self-reflective tool to read from somebody in the UK. I then picked up the Record Diaries, which I was very interested to read and I guess slightly disappointed / frustrated by. This is written by somebody a few years ago now. This is a little bit out of date, by someone who's going under the pseudonym Samer, but it's basically a man who's been living in Syria and then escaped from Islamic State. These are his diaries that he managed to get out of the country kind of anonymously, and when this was written he was living in a refugee camp, and I was really excited for it because it's a kind of first-person account of what was happening in Syria, but also the book itself looked to be so beautiful. It's got lots of different illustrations kind of intersposed with the text, which I guess kind of helps to humanise it and also give a sense of like atmosphere. What Samer is saying and the actual details of what was happening in Raqqa is so interesting and so important, and I really liked reading from his perspective. My issue with the book is I don't think it's very well structured as a narrative or even as an account, really. It's been, I guess, translated and put together by other people. There's a note from the journalist who put these diaries together at the beginning. It felt like characters were coming in and out of his life quite almost willy-nilly. There wasn't a very wider context about all of the people, and that's because if you're writing a diary, you'd just be like, oh, John did this today. You wouldn't think to explain who John was until he became relevant in your life. So I kind of understand why it's written like that, but it did make it harder to kind of put a bit of narrative together. So I don't really know what my review is of this book because it's a non-fiction kind of diary entries, you know, like how could I say, oh, there's not enough narrative or there's not enough plot in it, but I feel like the purpose of the book is surely to get kind of experiences out of there. I think it just frustrates me because it made the book not as powerful as it could have been and it should have been. So I'm kind of annoyed on the book's behalf, if that makes sense, but that doesn't mean it's not worth a read. I have another feminist orchestra book as part of this video as well because I was so excited to read it. As soon as it became September, I picked up Trainwreck by Sadie Doyle. Now this is non-fiction again, and it's a look at how women in popular culture, not just recently in the media, but actually historically as well, are portrayed as train wrecks, in the sense that there is an idealised female person, which we're all supposed to be, and we build up a woman and think how amazing she is, and then we're kind of waiting for her to fall. And if someone gets too emotional, if someone is too needy, if someone is too sexual, if someone drinks too much, then they're on this kind of downward spiral, which everybody kind of has pushed them to the edge of and then loves watching them fall down. And it's so interesting, she uses examples of kind of the obvious modern examples are like Britney Spears and maybe Miley Cyrus, like someone who's taken that good girl image and then destroyed it. She talks about Amy Winehouse, Billie Holiday, but then she also goes further back and looks at examples of Mary Wollstonecraft and like Sylvia Plath and Charlotte Bronte, and she looks at how media has been portraying these women as, I guess, hysterical, or people who are too crazy, too outside of their mould. And it's been done in order to keep them in their place and to make you disbelieve the things that they are saying and discredit their work and their words. And it's just, It's absolutely fascinating. Jean and I will be filming a video where we go into this book in much more depth, and that will be on my channel in a few weeks' time, because this is still our reader's pick for October as well. So if you are joining us as part of the read along with this book, you still have plenty of time to read it, plenty of time to get involved in the discussions on Goodreads. But safe to say, I loved it. I thought it was so fascinating. And finally, I wanted something which was just kind of nice escapism, something really comfy and cozy to read. So I picked up The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and this was lovely. This is the beginning of, I think, is a trilogy, if not a series. There's at least 3 books in this series, and this is the first one. It did definitely feel like the beginning of a trilogy, but apart from that, I thought it was just really lovely. It's about a young girl growing up in medieval Russia, and she's the granddaughter of a witch, and as she's kind of growing up as part of her family, she is seeing all the different house spirits. It takes a lot of Russian folklore, and when a new priest comes to the village and starts to get all of the townsfolk a little bit more zealous in their Christian beliefs and gets them to abandon their traditional habits of like leaving bread and milk out for the house spirits and things, then things all start to go wrong. And it's very much about kind of the spirits and religion, and also winter as a personification. So it's very magical. I loved all the kind of imagery of like Russia in the winter and this sort of family and how they're growing up. I did keep feeling as I was reading it, I was like, is she going to go on an exciting journey at some point? Which she doesn't. But I kind of feel like in my head that this is very, very much setting the scene for who Vazia is and what she's going to be doing in further books. But it was just nice. It was just a really nice, comfy, cozy read. I read this on my mini moon, like next to a fire with a blanket on top of me, and it was just bliss. I would love to hear from you if you've read any of these books. I'd love to hear your opinions on them, or if any of these books you would like to read. What have you been reading in August and September? And I will see you in my next video. Bye.